Hi, this is Nancy with Quilting with Nancy. Thank you very much for coming back as we continue to learn how to make this kind of interesting Bargello. So instead of a Bargello that just has the tapestries that go up and down, with the Bargello working on today called Barging Ahead, the quilt will be making a full circle. Now this is what we started on last week. This is the colors that I chose. If you haven't watched part one will go back and teach you how to pick out the fabrics that you're going to choose for this particular quilt and how to cut and sew your strips together to be the most accurate. Once you have all of your strip sets sewn like this, then you're ready to start following in the book to know what to do for each row. The quilt is constructed from the center out. So this is the very center strip. And if I show you the chart, you'll see what I mean. So there is a coloring chart. I failed to mention that last time. So once you've picked out your colors, here is a black and white version of the quilt so that you can actually kind of color it and get out your color pencils and give yourself, an idea of what it might look like. Now on the chart, this is what we will follow. So if you've ever done cross stitch or any of, crochet, where every row tells you what to do, this is what we're working on. So we started with 21 and we made the 21 strip. And from there, you start working out, going to the right and to the left. What you see behind me now is row 13 all the way to, what is that? 29. So 21 all the way to 29, 21 all the way down to 12. It's all done very symmetrically. And you're actually at the same time piecing the top section and the bottom section. So it's sort of done in quadrants, but yet it's done in columns too. Follow the book, you'll do just fine. So if we're following along, our next strip set is the column or row number 12 and 30, and you'll see that they are exactly the same. Okay? So now if we turn to the instructions for row 12 and 30, oops, went too far. And as I'm doing it, I'll actually be marking. I'm using a Frixion pen, so I can just erase it off the page if I want to. So when I'm working on another one, I can just get rid of that. That's what a Frixion pen does for you when on paper. I've already done row 13 to 29. Now I'm going to work on row 12 and 30. So for this, it tells me to cut a 10-inch strip out of section A. Remember, we had 3 sections, A, B, and C. I always like to put my label on the end that has the selvage end to it. Again, that just helps me keep myself straight. So this has all been properly pressed, and you'll make multiples of each one of these. It's in the instructions telling you how. So I'm going to come down here. Love this big 16.5-inch ruler because it's big enough to cut the entire strip set A. And you're going to find one of the middle seams and put a horizontal line on the middle seam so that you can know that you are horizontally straight. There. So I've got that line following, whoops, got to move that down a little bit, right there. So I'm nice and straight. I'm going to cut off some of the selvage edge to straighten everything out. There's that. Then I'm going to turn this around and cut a 10-inch wide strip. So following here to 10 on my left. So this is the strip of A that will be constructed into row 12 and 29, or 12 and 30, whatever. Yep, 12 and 30. Now I also need to do that with strip set C. So this is my C strip set. And as you know how I said I like to keep the selvages together. Yeah, it doesn't always happen. This time I got it flipped around, although my colors are in the right order. I'm going to come to this end again, line up a horizontal line on the seam right here so I know that I'm running true. Spin that around and cut a 10-inch wide section. So these are the 2 sections that I will be using, but you won't be using them all. Okay, so this is where it can get a little bit confusing. So the instructions tell me to cut two 10-inch, I needed to cut two 10-inch wide strips of set A and one of set C. So I need to cut one more of those, and then I'll take you through the next step. So I've got the strip sets that the book asked me to cut, a 10-inch wide, two 10-inch wides of strip set A, and one 10-inch wide of strip set C. And then out of strip set A, you're going to take fabric 6 and 7 off of that strip set. The second strip set, you're going to take fabric 5, 6, and 7. Now, how do you keep track of all of that? Your chart. Come back to your chart 100 times. The book is very clear. On one strip set, remove 6 and 7. So I looked on my chart. Oh, this is 6 and this is 7. Okay, so I'm going to remove this one and this one. So now I've got a shorter strip set. Then the second strip set A, I'm going to take off 5, 6, 7. So now this one is gone. After that, I do find it best to actually press these seams flat if they're one that has been pressed on a fold. In this particular case, the C strip set has none taken off, but I thought it might be a good thing if I show you how to remove the strip sets. Now, with the spray sizing on the fabric, it's going to make the fabric very, very stable, and I love more spray sizing than less. Now, some people like to mist their fabrics. I like to saturate my fabrics and keep them very stiff, and that's very important with this process. It's also very important that you have sewn your strip sets together with a 50 weight 100% cotton thread, so that when it comes time that you need to move, let's say I need to remove number 6 and 7, I can come here to this seam and just like that, take it apart. But because I've done spray sizing that stabilized my fabric, and because I've used a 50 weight cotton thread, I'm able to take that seam off quite easily. Now that is not going to be for everybody. I understand. Some people, and you're more than welcome to do this, you're going to want to take your seam allowance or your seam ripper, and you'll take out, got to get that seam under there. Take it under, see, it's not as easy as it sounds. There. And kind of take it out one stitch at a time, maybe 2 stitches at a time, and that's okay. Or maybe even just do a start. It cannot get my seam ripper under there, don't know why, but you know what I mean, probably because it's not right next to my face. You can take it out like this. Also, you can consider taking out a few and then tear it apart just like this, and with that thread and with it stabilized, it will be fine. Okay, so we're going to move that to the side. Now we're going to assemble these 3 pieces into one big section. And it shows very clearly in the book what you're going to do. We're going to have 8, 9, 10, 11. So I want to confirm. Yep, this is 8, 9, and 10. On the top of that, I'm going to put a strip set that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see. Is that it? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the other side will have 1, 2, 3, 4. So following in the book. So I'm going to construct these pieces that have been cut 10 inches wide into one full strip set, and then we'll come back. So I've got that strip set sewn together for row 12 and 30. Remember, you're working on the 2 rows at the same time. So here they are. This was from the strip set A with 2 strips removed. This is strip set C, and this is strip set A again with 3 removed. And I've pressed them all very nicely, keeping in mind I might need to repress before I sew them together. But I did, again, give it a little bit more spray sizing. Want this to be very secure. So the instructions now tell you to take that 10-inch strip and cut it in half. So now we're going to take this. This was a 10-inch strip. We're going to cut it into 2 5-inch strips. Okay. 2 5-inch strips. And then one of those strips, you're going to take off one of the ends. I believe it's this one. So looking over here, yep, I'm going to take off this strip, this little piece, nope, this little piece right here. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need to remove this one piece off of just this 5-inch strip set. So just take it off. All right, now I'm going to spin this around and I'm going to attach this all together into one long 5-inch strip. So I'll take it to my ironing board, I'll press that seam flat, and then sew this together and come right back. So for working on this next strip set, you'll notice I cut the 10-inch strip and then I cut it down into a 5, and now I've constructed it into the one 5-inch strip. Now once you get it to this point, this is when you want to check your seams. Make sure that they're pressed in the right direction, because it seemed throughout the quilt, no matter what I did, sometimes a whole section would be correct with the seams in the opposite directions, and then sometimes it wouldn't be. Honestly, I couldn't quite figure out one way or the other to make it so it would work out every time. But at this point, I'll take my quilt down. This is how far I have it done. And I'll see which section I'm going to go. Let's see, if I turn it this way, I think this might help. Right? So from the back side, I can see that this seam needs to go down, this one up, this one down, this one up, this one down, this one up. Check that all out while the strip set is still twice as wide as it needs to be. That way you won't have to go back and press all these individual seams. So I've done most of that, and now I'm ready to take this 5-inch strip set and cut it down one more time. So started with 10, cut it in half, flipped it around, so now it was pieced into one big long strip. Now I can cut this down into 2.5 inches, because we're working on the left and the right quadrants, or the left and right side and the quadrants at the same time. So now I've got 2 strip sets that'll go on either side of the quilt. So we've got, let's see, if I move it this way, you'll see that this is the 12 right there. And I'm going to put, there we go. Ooh, looks like I did it right. So everything is continuing in a downward progression. Oh, but I think I flipped these 2 around. That's happened a couple of times. Those 2, this should be 8, 9, 10, and I've got it 8, 10, 9. You'll be able to figure this out for yourself. I guess the problem with this colorway that I chose is that the colors were so slightly different. It was actually much more difficult to piece together than the one that was behind me. But I'm just going to let that go for now. But I'm going to piece this on one side and then this other strip on the whole other side. So to pre-piece this, I'm going to pin every single seam. So I'm going to come here to the top. Yep, my progression is going right. Technically, this is switched around, but we'll just leave it the way it is for now. And making sure that my seams are butting in the opposite direction. So the one underneath is going to the left, the one on top is going to the right, and pin it. Same thing, and I will pin each and every intersection. This is my technique for knowing that everything is going to be where I want it to be in the end. So let me get this all pinned, then we'll come back and sew this seam. So we're just about done with the processes that it takes to make this quilt. It's really just one column at a time on the 2 sides. So here I talked to you about how when I had that strip set at 5 inches, before I cut it down into the narrower strips, I try to correct any seams that need to be switched over to another direction, and that worked pretty good, but it always seems like I miss a couple. So I'm going to pin each one of the intersections like I have here, but then sometimes I didn't get the seams pressed in the correct direction, so I'm just going to force it with the pin into the correct pressing, and then when I get the row done, I will fix that pressing, okay? So going to the sewing machine, we're set with our scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. and we're going to sew. And the idea is I want you to have a seam ripper or an awl handy so that you can be paying attention to what the seams are doing underneath. And I am going to sew over pins. I'm going to make my machine go quite slowly as I sew over pins. Just like that. Now, do I ever hit a pin? Well, of course, occasionally I hit a pin. But if you go nice and slow and your pins are done very vertical, so very vertical compared to the needle, you won't hit the pin as often as maybe you think you might, right? So use your seam ripper as you go, making sure the seams stay in the proper direction. I'm going to get this seam sewed and show you just a little bit more on pressing and then how to finish up your Bargello. My strip has been sewed on, and these are the seams that I showed you that I had to flip them one way or the other. I'm going to take my iron now with the steam on, and I'm honestly set at the highest heat level for my iron too. I do like to work with very high heat and lots of steam. I'm always going to set that seam first so everything looks nice and straight. Then I'm going to flip this up. And all of my seams, everything matches up beautifully because I did the pinning on each and every seam. Then after I steam press it, I'm going to turn off the steam and give that seam a little bit more spray sizing. Now you might think I'm doing overkill on the spray sizing. I'm not. I just love it when my quilts are very crisp. That is going to make it a little bit easier to do the quilting when you're done with the quilt top. So this would be the next row, and you would continue out. Now the booklet, here's the booklet. It's going to talk to you about constructing it so that you're going to have, let's see if I can find that section. So after you get, I think, row 7 done, then you're going to start working on the 2 segments. So the idea is that you'll get a piece to maybe about here. I'm not exactly sure, but about here. And then you'll make the final pieces as 2 separate sections and then put them on. Only because it started to get really big and bulky, and I thought, well, this is getting a little bit silly having all this bulk when I could just make 1 strip set and another strip set and then attach them to the middle. So you start from the middle, then you're assembling out left and right, left and right, left and right. Then you'll build another strip set that goes off of that and attach them together. And then your quilt is done. You want to, of course, square it up a little bit and put some borders on, but then you want to think about the quilting. Now, one really easy quilting technique is what I did on the original Bargello. So with an original Bargello, I'll just take and do a slightly straight but slightly curved line, just following the color design. So here I'm following the solid purple, and then I'll come back down with the solid purple. Now, technically, that might be able to be done with your walking foot, but it would be kind of hard to turn it. There'd be so much bulk. On the quilt behind me, it wouldn't be that hard. If you think about it, just looking at this yellow strip, if you followed with 1 straight line going all the way down on the yellow, once you get to here, you turn once and continue back up and then go all the way around. That would not be that hard of a quilting solution, and you could do it yourself with your walking foot or with your free motion foot. Now, of course, you could always have things done by a long arm quilter, and that would be fabulous. The quilt would be done. We do love it when our quilts are done. Now, I chose on this quilt to do what is called hyper quilting, something I learned from videos way back when from a quilter whose name is Patsy Thompson. Loved her quilting videos, and she talked about hyper quilting. So when I quilted the quilt behind me, I first went over it with a brown thread. I quilted some of the flowers and leaves and some loop-de-doos. Then I went back with an orange thread and added accent quilting throughout. Now that was a choice I made. The quilting that you do will be your choice. Personally, I like more quilting I like things to have a lot of quilting on them. That's a personal choice. Depending on the batting you use, you really don't have to do a whole bunch of tight quilting like I did. But you do want to be sure that every one of these seams is secured. So if you choose to do the straight lines, all those seams will be secure. Your quilt will be able to be washed, and you'll be happy with it for a long time. So I want to thank Smith Owen Sewing Center for letting me use the big classroom. This was just one of those projects that was just too big to do in my studio. I felt like I didn't have the space to lay everything out. So thank you, Tim and Cindy, for letting me use your store classroom for recording this. If you have any questions, you can contact me at quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. The book is available as a hard copy book or as an e-pattern. You can get that on our website, www.quiltingwithnancy.com. Pretty easy to remember. Hope you enjoyed this project. Athena thought that it would be important too that I kind of mentioned to you that this is maybe not a beginner quilt. Yep, it's all just done with strips, all just, piecing together, but it's almost the ideas of, putting those strips together, taking them apart. If you're an organized beginner, you're not going to have any problem at all with this quilt. This is not the quilt for a beginner that wants to rush through things. Taking your time, following the numbers, marking everything as you go, you're going to be safe and the quilt is going to be beautiful. Thank you very much for joining me for our Barging Ahead videos.